Our first story is from fluffy_supermarket_6. Fired from my job, but received a year worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200 USD, and in those days, there were not that many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85 10-minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. This meant I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music. They were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing, all of which I had to use my own equipment and software, because their cameras and computers were so old they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080p. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month, however. One day, when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it, and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything, from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times. The list goes on. But I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office where I saw my manager putting on her best, displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work, and it was already halfway through the year, and I had only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I had been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week, over 60 hours, just to do what needed to be done. And that being a one-man army made things impossible. And also the fact that the videos I had put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in with my numbers, at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how would they even meet the KPI if they were to fire me. Now my manager had snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry. Manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources. And I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database, as my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries except one. The one, I had a friend working as a junior director, not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him of my plan, and sure enough, within 2 days, they were called to come into pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who, upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical, step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university, as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house back then was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function. Producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary. And I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended here, and I had gotten back at my former bosses, but to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had face-palmed when I told her that my manager had found out that I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the university. The content creation project which I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about a year and a half of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she had thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so that she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house, and a year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. Wow, the revenge was brilliant, hitting every mark. Having been unfairly fired for an impossible workload, OP turned the tables by sabotaging their manager's backup plan. He manipulated the production house contacts, funneling the job to a friend and earning a 15% fee for himself while ensuring the university vastly overspent. The manager's last-ditch attempt to finish the project backfired spectacularly, and she got fired while OP sweetly earned financial and professional victory. The next story is from Flowing_Oddity. Say goodbye to your house and your retirement. This one is not technically my revenge, but some revenge I got to see up close and take joy from, and slightly participate in. The background is most of the story, so this will be a little long. Trigger warning for self-harm. I was in the Navy and stationed on the submarine base in Connecticut. I had a friend I met in boot camp, and we were in the same class for our A school, Navy job training. We'll call that friend Bill. Now, Bill wasn't the most physically fit guy. He was short, kind of chubby, and wore glasses. However, Bill was really smart, and as the sonar technician he was meant to be, he would have been amazing. He had a pragmatic way of looking at things I really valued in a friend, and I know it would have made him successful if he had made it out to the fleet. While in school, we had a couple of petty officers that were hard asses. They somehow convinced themselves they were super soldiers, despite the fact that our jobs in that field are really nerd-centric. You get picked for that job because of your math and computer skills, not your deadlift number. Still, they were both all about being fit and working out all the time. We would do physical training 3 times a week, and while most of us could keep up, Bill often fell behind on runs or didn't quite meet what these two idiots believed to be the standard. To be clear, Bill did pass the minimum requirements for fitness. He just didn't go as extreme as these guys. Side note for other Navy vets, he got the MC Pond coin for how hard he pushed himself at PT the day he visited. The end result was that they would constantly berate and belittle Bill. They'd call him fat, lazy, and everything else. They'd tell him he should kill himself, you name it. They were always on his ass despite him passing his assessments. At some point, Bill pushed himself too hard and injured his knee. He told these petty officers he was injured and had been seen by the doc on base. The doc had put him on light duty so the knee could recover. He had the paperwork to back it up. They elected to ignore that and threaten him with kicking him out if he didn't do the workouts. So Bill kept pushing himself, injuring himself more, and his mental health degraded the whole time. In my time in the Navy, you didn't get mental health services really, The only person to talk to like that was the chaplain. For those who don't know, the chaplain is the religious leader, usually a pastor, priest, or rabbi, that has signed up as a commissioned officer. Our chaplain was the sweetest little woman you ever met. But as a chaplain, she held the rank of captain, high-ranking officer. So Bill set up a meeting with the chaplain to talk about things. When Bill informed the petty officers he would be missing class the next day for his chaplain meeting, they yelled at and berated him more. They called him a pussy, useless, not fit for the Navy, and everything else you can imagine. They convinced Bill he was being weak and the chaplain wouldn't care about his issues, that nobody would care. They promised to make life even harder if he didn't show the next day. So he cancelled his meeting. Evidently, bad luck hit, and that night, his girlfriend was also breaking it off with him. She wasn't worth his time or money, but he couldn't see that. That night, I awoke to a 3 a.m. call from Bill. I couldn't hear anything, and I asked several times, "Bill, you there? Are you okay?" It wouldn't have been the first time that I got a drunk dial from one of my friends after a hard day like Bill had. Sailors have been known to drown their sorrows a bit. Eventually, I figured it was a butt dial, drunk dial, and hung up and went back to bed. I still regret that decision. The next day, all hell broke loose. Me and a couple other friends got calls from Bill's now ex-girlfriend informing us he was in the hospital because he slit his own throat. Turned out a few of us got that 3 a.m. call, but Bill couldn't speak at the time and was kind of out of it due to blood loss. We finished what we had to do on base and rushed over to the hospital. As we got there, the chaplain was on her way out, and we passed her in the hallway. She spoke to us briefly to say that Bill would be okay, and she wouldn't forget this. I have never seen a look on someone's face that so accurately depicted raw, unfiltered rage. It took us all by surprise because she was such a small, sweet, and personable lady. But the look in her eyes, you could just tell she wanted someone to pay for this. She wanted revenge, and we all knew she wore the kind of rank that could get it done. We visited Bill, who could barely talk, but he told us the story of what had happened, what he was thinking at the time, and how glad he was it didn't work. Apparently it was cold enough that the blood clotted on the outside of his neck and made a kind of patch that kept him alive long enough for the EMS to find him and get him to a hospital. The doctor said he missed his carotid by about a millimeter. A week went by and we hadn't heard anything until we got called in by the chief of the training command, the boss to these petty officers. He said he wanted to check on the rest of us and make sure there weren't any other issues with these guys he wasn't aware of, and that we were all okay. I let him know about an ass chewing he gave me a few months back, that I was really set up by these guys and they had lied to him. My friends cited a couple other examples of their own with these guys being generally shitty, dishonest people. I don't think it mattered. I think their fates were already sealed and we were being asked for more ammo to bury them with. The next day, they were nowhere to be found, and we were introduced to new instructors who would be taking over our training permanently. After class, I decided to stop by and ask the chaplain what happened. She told me she had never been more disgusted by the actions of a sailor than these two guys who convinced someone not to come see her. She teared up a bit regretting that she didn't get the chance to help Bill before he made his attempt. In her mind, it was these two that precipitated and enabled Bill's attempt. So on to the revenge. The chaplain told me she went to the admiral in charge of the entire base and demanded their immediate discharge. He granted it. Both petty officers were immediately processed out with dishonourable discharges. I can't remember the exact charge I heard they cited for it, but I know the Navy has a way of selling BS on paper when they want a certain outcome, especially officers at that high level. So basically, they get no VA benefits of any kind, got kicked out of the base housing they lived in, and could probably only find work at a gas station or under the table stuff somewhere. Also, I know from someone else who got the boot that the Navy only pays for a single bus ticket to get you back home, not your family or any of your belongings. When you have a discharge like that, no company with DoD contracts is allowed to hire you. That includes McDonald's because they have stores on bases throughout the country. Taco Bell, Subway, etc. None of them will give you a job. They can't and they don't want to anyway. So I don't know where these guys went or what become of them, but I know their lives were irrevocably ruined. One of them had about 18 years in, so he was 2 years from retirement and lost it all. The other was at about 12 years, so he also lost a lot. Wherever they are now, I'd be very surprised to hear they're making more than minimum wage. As for Bill, well, he made a full recovery. He got a full medical discharge, which is an honourable discharge that meant E5 pay for the rest of his life, full benefits, and a referral to a counsellor in his home state once he got back there. All paid for by the Navy. We lost touch over the years, but I did see on Facebook he got himself together, became a police officer, and got married. Edit to add. For those who have pointed it out, their discharges were actually arch, but I didn't want to have to explain the difference or have people Google it. We always used dishonourable colloquially for arch BCD because they all mean you got the boot and your life is going to suck. But no, they didn't do full CM or any brig time, but I did hear they pushed it to ASB and lost. Also saw someone pointed out Bill wouldn't get the medical at 100% for his neck. That's also true, he wouldn't have, but they wrote it up for his knee because it was basically bone on bone inside. I think they decided to do him a favour and not put him down as a mental health discharge. The revenge was deeply satisfying and justice-driven. The two petty officers who tormented Bill to the point of near tragedy got exactly what they deserved. Their dishonourable, or technically OTH, discharges left them with no VA benefits, no future career prospects, and shattered their financial security. One was just 2 years from retirement, which made it especially fitting that their cruelty cost them everything they'd worked for. Meanwhile, Bill's life took a positive turn, with a medical discharge granting him full benefits, lifelong pay, and a chance to rebuild. The chaplain's intervention ensured they faced severe consequences. Perfect revenge, indeed.